Hi, I'm Charles Germany. Tonight we're going to talk about PC hardware and components and some tools that you might use to assist you in working with PCs. To start out with, let's look at some tools you may find useful in working on PCs. It's just a very simple, small toolkit. Preferably the smaller screwdriver sizes for working on laptops and smaller components, and larger screwdrivers for things like Phillips head screws, straight screws, hex tools, needle nose pliers, tweezers. All of those wire cutters may prove useful in working with small components or having to modify or repair things. You may also want to invest in a multi-tester. This is a cheap one, costs about $10 from Radio Shack. There's a little bit more sophisticated one I've had my eye on Tiger Direct. It's about $200, but it's a self-contained card that you can use to test power supplies. And it takes the guesswork out of it. We'll talk about how to look at a bad power supply and test a bad power supply, but this is a tool that you would use. When you get to the networking portion, you may want to invest in some networking tools. This is a set of crimpers, about $20. A soldering iron, $15, Radio Shack, or you can get a more sophisticated instrument. I don't use this as often as I used to. Most of the newer components are self-contained. There's very little need for soldering unless you're repairing something that was broken off, or maybe some type of physical damage to something where you may have to reconnect two pieces. This is a networking tester that is very useful in resolving network problems. And I got this one for about $30. And again, until we get to the networking portion and we actually begin to talk about that, we'll kind of delay explaining that and using that until later. Okay, so these are some basic tools: some wire strippers, wire cutter, electrical tape occasionally. Something that I find very useful when I'm running around the office in the day is a little multi-tool. You might keep it in your pocket just with some pliers. And again, this has a little screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, and straight screwdriver. And of course, you may also want to include a helpful robotic companion. Or maybe not. Okay, let's look at the inside of a computer and some of its components. To start with, I call this computer Frankenstein. It's a file server I keep at my house. It runs Linux, Ubuntu. It's basically a file server, a web server. I use it for a few other things. From the front of it, you can see typically what you might find in a modern PC. Here's some USB ports. Of course, these I cut myself. Again, the computer's name is Frankenstein. It's a conglomeration of spare parts. Floppy drive, you probably won't find on most modern PCs. They're no longer used. They've become obsolete. Just like the 5 1/4 inch discs, then we went to 3.5 inch floppies, and most of the newer computers, laptops and desktops, no longer come with floppy drives. They'll usually come with some type of a smart media reader that reads secure digital, or some type of Memory Stick Pro, or compact flash card, and that has come to replace the floppy drive. As well, you may also have a CD or DVD burner. This is a combination CD-DVD burner. This is just a hard drive cooler for an additional hard drive. But those, from the front of your PC, you can't really tell a lot about what's going on inside of it and the components. We can tell a little bit more about it if we were to look at the back side. We can tell that this is the power supply. Power supplies have to have a cooling fan because they tend to generate a lot of heat. Power supply is a very important component for your PC. A lot of things can go wrong, and one of the telltale signs of a bad power supply is this key word, intermittent. Intermittent problems, in other words, problems that, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it boots, sometimes it won't. Sometimes I'm using it and it shuts down, and sometimes it won't. Sometimes I get the blue screen of death and sometimes I don't. That could be a power supply problem or issue. The reason is all of the circuitry inside your PC requires standard voltages, and they're very precise voltages. And over time, due to chip creep from excessive heat, or due to power spikes and surges from being connected to a dirty, source of power, your power supply components can begin to fail. When they fail, they begin, it may still work, it may still power your PC, but the different components and the different circuitry inside your PC, they're not going to get the voltages that they need. Now, there are several different form factors. Tonight, we're really only going to deal with ATX. In the old AT form factor, those machines used two simple voltages. They had 5 volts and 12 volts. But when we went to the ATX form factor, which is most of the modern desktops that people use today, there are actually 3 voltages produced by a modern power supply. 12 volts, 5 volts, and 3.3 volts. The 3.3 volts is a trickle amount of power that is still supplied to the mainboard even when the system is turned off. And this gives it different capabilities such as ACPI, soft power on by touching the keyboard. And a good power supply, not all of them, but a good one, will generally have an on-off switch on it, on the back. And, like I said, even though a computer is turned off, a modern ATX system still receives a trickle 3.3 volts on the mainboard. So it's still getting some current, and that's how it can sense either wake on LAN for somebody to wake it up across the network, or soft power on for somebody to turn it on by clicking a key on the keyboard. So to truly turn it off, if you were going to work on it, or you wanted to be sure you didn't short something out, maybe you accidentally rubbed across the traces on the main board or something, you want to turn the switch off. Inside of it, you'll find a transformer which converts the AC voltage to DC voltage. There's an array of capacitors which store current or electricity, sort of like batteries. And there's a network of resistors which do simply what their name implies. They resist the current. And so you're able to take this wild, crazy, alternating current that comes in and massage it and twist it and transform it into clean DC power that comes out the other side. You'll see a couple of other devices on a typical mainboard. These are ports here, in this case for a keyboard and for a mouse, and they follow the PS2 standard. And here we have a couple of USB ports. You're familiar with that. Most mainboards have built-in networking now, so here again a built-in Ethernet port. That's an RJ45 receptacle. We have 2 serial ports, which a lot of newer systems don't even come with serial ports. They're not used very often. And even people that need to use serial ports due to having legacy hardware, a lot of times they'll get a USB to serial port adapter, and they'll plug it into one of their USB ports on a modern system, and that would give them a serial port. This is a little bit older system, Frankenstein. Got bits and pieces of 7, 8 different computers in this baby here. So he does have serial ports. This is a parallel port. Now these were 9-pin serials. This is 25, and it's got a built-in sound chip, which I'm not using, so I disabled that. If you continue looking down the unit, here's a cooling port. Looks a little dusty. I need to blow some of the dust out of this thing. This is a video card. In this case, an AGP video card. It follows that form factor. And this is a VGA external output where you would connect your monitor. This is a sound card, an additional sound card. It's a sound blaster. This is an add-on firewire card. Alright, so for IEEE 1394 firewire, even though this system did not come with it equipped, most modern systems now have it usually on a front panel or somewhere in the back. You can add that as an expansion card, a PCI card. And this is USB 2. Now, it does have USB, but it's only USB 1.1. That was the older standard of USB, and it had a very limited amount of bandwidth. Your USB 2 standard today has 480 megabits per second in terms of bandwidth, so it's significantly improved over the old USB 1.1 standard, where you may have received about 11 megabits